G'day there, Sainers. Jaden here with another Thursday night edition of the team's second last one for this year, which is kind of sad in a way. But let's enjoy it while we can. Excuse me. Let me bring on tonight's guest. Just the three of us tonight with Alana and Ollie returning. As always, we'll shout out Southside Pizzas down in Moorabbin, your local pizzeria, especially as we start getting into the warmer months as well. Getting out of winter, which would be nice in Victoria because it's an absolute pain. But guys, last week, I said at the start before we came on the show, comfortable but not convincing against the Tigers. What are we looking for as we head into the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think it'd just be nice to see us get back to our complete best with our brand, our Saints footy as we know it, with our high contested possession game. I mean, it was just strange to have such a low tackle count. Just seemed like both teams were just ready to put the cue in the rack and say goodbye to the season this game. So I'd like to come out a little bit harder against Geelong, because if we do this to Geelong, it's going to be the same score we had against Brisbane. So, yeah, hopefully we can come out firing and not so complacent, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 12 months ago, Ollie, we were not in a similar position, but we played Geelong late in the season, and the scenarios were vastly different. Geelong was trying to stay within the top 8 race. They're looking to sew up a top 4 spot now, and we were looking to maintain our position in the 8. Whereas now we're on the back foot and counting down the sleeps till the end of the season. So, what is the benefit of is it the next 2 weeks? Identifying some of those fringe players. We've touched on it a couple of weeks in a row now, but those fringe players to see what they can present at the higher opportunity, or is it, going for the likes of a Seb Ross and Jones being like, okay, are they actually in our future? Let's get them a send-off game as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because you could go both ways, and you could blood the youth a little bit and see what the future's like and see how competitive they can be against two sides that are, well, one side that's most likely going to make top 8, and then Carlton's a bit iffy in the next couple of weeks. But you could really go that way and plan for the future. And are these guys that maybe haven't played yet, are they going to be a part of it? I think we've seen a lot of the people that might not be a part of our future get their run, and they might have had their chance already. So I think even though Ross doesn't like making changes, I think he'll lean more towards competitiveness for the future and see what the young guys can bring.
Just on that, who are those players that you mentioned that may have had their run and now just not in that future planning?
I'd say Seb would be in that. Ben Patton, I think, has had his shot. Zach Jones, even though he's been good, I still don't see him maybe in the next couple of years playing in the 2s. That might be about it for a bit of depth and experience. So just those sort of guys that have kind of run through our midfield mostly. I still see Membry having a spot in the team. Injuries and form pending and all that sort of stuff. But mostly those midfield guys that we've been unsure of in the last few weeks. Yeah,
no, I like where you're going with it. Now, I like starting the show a little bit early because we can sort of reflect on the 2's performance from the week before. And they had a really solid win against Richmond on, I think it was Sunday morning at about 11 o'clock. And there's one particular name that we'll touch on. But from what you saw from that game and the stats that have come out of that game, Alana, who's your recommendation for, possibly coming back for the Geelong game? Mateus is still going to be out with illness. That was reported, I think it was either today or yesterday, as well as those that are watching at home. Share your thoughts on who can possibly come in to the team for this weekend.
Yeah, well, I think the no-brainer has to be Garcia after his game. I mean, 3 goals, over 10 tackles again, and over 30 touches. He's picked himself. You got to find a spot for him in the team based off that. I think he's had a few consecutive solid weeks now, so I think his time has well and truly come. I think Heath's had another solid game as well. He's had a really good year in the VFL. So, I mean, we've all been saying that Marshall's well and truly due for a rest, staying in the team, but just, having a bit of support with him. But, I mean, in saying that, Marshall was probably one of our standout performers on the weekend. But, yeah, God, he must be tired.
Other
than that,
he loves to push forward as well.
Yeah, he likes to push forward too. So yeah, it would actually free him up, and I think he's been really good as a forward as well. He's just had a really incredible season, Marshall, and I think he deserves to at least be spoken about in terms of All Australian. But I'm not really hearing it too much. But I don't know if that's the St Kilda bias or what it is. But yeah, I'm a bit surprised he's not up there, particularly with Gawn having in and out with injury and not his usual consistent season, I suppose. Like I just would have thought, and like same with English, I feel like he had a bit of a slow start. So yeah, I just don't know why Marshall. I'm getting off track here talking about Marshall, but yeah.
No, I agree with it, and it was something I was going to touch on later as well, which we will. Sort of like our All Australian chances and who's performed well to earn a blazer, but he's definitely in that conversation. Everyone's leaning towards Tristan Xerri, which I think he's had a really good year. Don't get me wrong. But when you compare the numbers and those sort of things, Marshall's definitely stack up. So definitely can converse on that one later. You touched on Garcia. He had the 3 goals, 34 touches, 9 clearances, 12 tackles. I don't know what more he could have done to earn a spot. I think they've definitely tried to play him in a role, much like Mateus, to really get that confidence up. And hopefully this week we do see him return. Ollie, looking at the other names that may pop up tonight, Matt Allison had an okay game in front of the scoreboard, 2 goals, 3, but had the 26 disposals and 8 marks. Jack Hayes returned to the twos. He kicked 2 goals, 1, had 16 touches. Ollie Houghton, another name that's come up, consistently 24 touches and 7 clearances. And Isaac Keeler had the 3 goals as well. So there's definitely opportunities there in terms of, names that have been performing well, but any of those that could stand out that can possibly come in tonight?
Yeah, the issue is there's so many of those guys have had good last couple of weeks and not all of them can come into the side. I think out of them all, Allison is most likely not to be at the club next year, so I wouldn't mind seeing him get a run. Maybe I know he's been floating between wing and sort of half forward sort of situation. So I wouldn't mind seeing him get a run. And either of like Heath or Keeler can give Rowe a chop out as well. So I feel like McLennan's going to get dropped, even though he's been good. He got subbed out early, so that's just a sign that I think he won't keep his spot. So maybe Houghton could come in as a sub. I'm not 100% sure, but I'd like to see one of them get a run because there's only 2 games left, and having all those guys untried going into next season, I don't think is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some comments coming through. Those that are watching at home, again, share your thoughts of, who's been in the twos that you want to see, a little bit of as we enter the last couple of weeks of the season. Wooden Spoon, excuse me, got to see Garcia and either Heath or Keeler. I don't think Heath played in the twos last week, but Keeler, as I said, kicked 3 goals, was a really strong target up forward. Bailey, back on the Rowe topic. Rowe is in all Australian form, but doesn't get looked on as much because of the club and how we are doing. I tend to agree, but at the same time, Tristan Xerri is being named quite consistently, and North are, still abysmal. So the impact of the results isn't, wavering the conversation, but definitely that he plays for us will definitely play a part. And Jan, if the likes of Heath, Keeler, Houghton, and Allison don't get a run, they will be looking elsewhere. And I think you're right on that one, Ollie. I think Allison is not in the club's future. They made that stance pretty clear, I would assume. And that's why we haven't seen him. Is there any other names that maybe a return for Ari, Riley Bonner coming back for this weekend's game?
I don't think so. I think Ari was good. I think we all were surprised when he was dropped, but he hasn't seemed to show that good form again at Sandy since. And Bonner, I just don't think he's up to the level, and I think it's a sign of. I kind of compare him a little bit to how Jared Leanett was when he played that one season. He played a few games. Obviously, Bonner's played almost every game up to now. But then we got rid of him at the end of the year. Like he was just filling a hole for one season, and that's all we needed him for. I think we'd all like to see Jack Hayes play, but I don't think he would. So, yeah, I'm not too sure about the others.
No, that is fair. Well, looks like the teams are up, and I think we sort of predicted where this was going. Ollie, I think you hit the nail on the head. But Garcia in McLennan is out for this weekend's game. I don't think McLennan performed all that badly. I think it was just a little bit of exposure and getting back into the twos. But again, looking at that, Alana, as a face value, happy with that? Sad and unsure? Non-surprised?
It's pretty much bang on what I was expecting to happen. Pretty much what Ollie said with McLennan getting subbed. The writing was on the wall. And I don't know who else would have made way. The usual suspects like Jones and the like, he's actually been fairly decent. So, I mean, I guess you're looking at McLennan saying, you've had a couple of games now, giving you a taste, but Garcia's had this performance in the VFL and we can't not play him. So, unfortunately, it's your turn to go back to the twos. So, yeah, I don't mind it. And, again, very, very Ross Lyon, like just the one change. So, definitely not unexpected and probably makes sense this time of year in a way, if I'm honest. And coming up against Geelong, I think he obviously wants his strongest team on the park to compete with the Cats. So, yeah, I'm hoping Garcia doesn't come in as a sub. I think that'll just annoy everyone. So, hopefully he comes in and plays a full game or at least starts. Maybe if he gets subbed start of the third quarter or something, I don't care too much about that, but at least start him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, he had 34 touches, 9 clearances, 12 tackles, and 3 goals. If that's sub, then Ollie, we might have to revisit that conversation we had a few weeks ago where we riot and go down onto the ground because that's just I don't think that's right. I want to touch on the team for last week. We obviously discussed that, but the surprise Jimmy Webster being the sub. Was anyone else confused by that? Like that, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, it was a bit weird, but at the same time, when he came on, I kind of understood, like, if that makes sense, because we were comfortably winning, and then he got subbed on, and then he's the senior head just to kind of slow it down. I don't know why he would be made the sub. Maybe, I don't know, because you can't really plan for injury. So unless they had a plan of how to shift players around if need be, I didn't mind it at the end of the day, but at the same time, you just can't plan how an AFL game's going to go. So I feel like a sub is more likened to someone who can fill a few different roles on the field.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Alana? Because I feel like you would be on the same path for that.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost like it was the club's intention because McLennan pretty much plays the exact same role. So it was almost like they came into this game thinking we're going to give McLennan like a half or 3/4 and then we're going to sub him off and Jimmy will take over. I reckon that's maybe what the club was thinking and just, sort of thought, we'll just risk and hope we don't get an injury. But I suppose even if we did, you can sort of shuffle the magnets and do what you need to anyway. So, yeah, I reckon that was probably the club's plan in hindsight. I remember at the time thinking Webster as sub was a bit strange, but, yeah, I think it worked out okay.
Yeah, I remember looking at my phone. We parked the car and started walking. And strange was the nice way to put it. I said, because I was with Jake at the time, and I said, look, I think that would be like the 19th person you put as sub because he has such a specific role within the team. He doesn't have that versatility to go up forward or play through the midfield. Like he's a small defender. That's literally his only sort of repertoire, and that's why he's named on the team almost always. But again, Ross up to his usual tricks. It worked out in the end, which is totally fine. A lot of love for Hugo Garcia tonight. Alex Garcia in about time. Chris, welcome back, Chris, by the way. Garcia should play last 2 games. Bailey, happy to see Hugo Garcia in. Needed to get a game in for next year. And Chris and Rodney as well was confused about Webster being our sub. Adrian's asked a question here, and we'll start with you, Ollie. Zach Jones, fairly decent. Is he playing for his future with the club? We brought him over from Sydney. I think that was 4 years ago now. Always, being the whipping boy with our performances. When we're good, he's really good. When we're bad, he's the one we go to straight away. How have you seen his form over the last month? And do you think that once the season has finished that he'll get offered a 1-year contract?
Yeah, look, I think he's changed his game style a bit because we saw him in the first few games he played. He came on as a sub and he would kind of get the ball and just bang it long whenever he could. And I think now that he's been able to get consistent midfield time, he's changed and he's sort of provided a bit more of an, I don't know how to describe the role, but he's almost provided the outlet, like given the outlet handball for a player to run onto, and then he's gotten out when he's needed to. So I think he'll get the 1 or 2 years and be a senior midfielder that guys are like Hugo Garcia can play within the twos if he needs to, and give him a bit of leadership and guidance into his future.
I think you touched on it well. I think I don't want to call him like the quarterback or the general, but like within that midfield group, he's that main point that's like, okay, I'll do the hard work and then I'll get it out to the guys who can do the polish. And I think he sort of leaned into that role, given that we haven't had Brad Crouch, for all of this year. He's only played the first game. I think at the moment he's earned enough to get a 1-year deal without the guarantee that he'll be playing senior football. Because, we've seen his form at the start of the year. It wasn't the best. Looks like he's enjoying his football and enjoying playing on a weekly basis again. Alana, do you think he can earn that stripe and still be serviceable next year?
Yeah, and I think especially if we do lose Seb and Brad Crouch, I think that we almost need to keep Jones just for that depth. I think we underrate how important it is to have the senior mids run through there just for their experience and their leadership. So based off Jones's, last sort of month, he's sort of done everything he can to put his hand up and say, yeah, I'm the man to earn the right to a contract extension. So, or a new contract. So, yeah, I think it's important we keep him. I think the writing may be on the wall for Brad Crouch with his knee, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is Seb's last year. So, yeah, if that's the case, I definitely want to hold on to Zach.
Absolutely. Now, I want to touch on a few players because we sort of not threw them under the bus, but, questioned their form after last week or the week before against Brisbane. So, Ollie, I'll start with you. Mitch Owens. Last week, I thought it was probably his best game all year. Provided a target up forward, but around the ground as well. His contest work was a lot better. He didn't look out of place against a more depleted side. Obviously, he's probably had confidence to go, okay, well, this is the bottom of the table. This is time where I can actually show something. But you factor in that with, the rise of Ryan Burns and those sort of things. How important is for those sort of players to finish the season strong?
Yeah, I think he started. We saw his form, start to take a turn in the Essendon game. He's kicked a couple of goals. He did a few nice things in that game, and he kind of just competed really well last week. Now, it's not a memorable game. Last week's one, I kind of left thinking, oh yeah, we won. Like, not a lot stands out, but there was a couple of things that he did. There was marking goal that he took. I think it was in the second quarter, maybe. And then there was one where he found Darcy Wilson out in the goal square. Now, that's not a kick that most people will try and bite off. Even though it was fairly open, he was outside 50 when he kicked it. So those sort of things are good signs for next year. I think if he can even get up the ground, if he's not playing midfield, if he can get up the ground a little bit more and still use his big body to then blast into the forward line, I think that's a really good sign for next year.
100%. The tank is going to be the absolute key. Now, Alana, we'll skip over Owens for you. Paddy Dow was another one. We sort of questioned his, performance against Brisbane. He came on as a sub, looked out of all sorts. Was a late in for Mateus last week with the illness, who's out again this week, which is disappointing. But I thought he really showed what he can do if he gets a full preseason and consistency under his belt of how important he could be to that midfield.
Yeah, I think he came in and sort of just did what he needed to do. And I think what we've been looking for him to do. I did sort of notice him out on the ground, which was nice considering it was, a game to sort of forget despite winning by nearly 50 points. He kicked a nice goal against his brother, which I'm sure he liked. I thought he was consistent pretty much throughout the whole game. Didn't have huge numbers, but certainly did enough. Thought he was pretty clean. So, I think be looking for him to back it up against Geelong. But, yeah, he was really solid and I guess justified being that late inclusion. He definitely held his spot for mine.
Absolutely. Now, let's go through some comments. Daryl, back on the topic of Zach Jones and the co. Are you serious? Please no. We hopefully draft midfielders. Enough said. Look, I think that midfield is definitely a target through the draft this year. Alex has brought up a comment. So the Geelong side looks vulnerable. If we can get the win, great. But where was his form from the start of the year? I wish we could be more consistent. Now, I pose a question to you, Ollie. Has the form actually changed in the way we're playing? Or is it now that we're getting some polish and bang for our buck on the scoreboard?
I would agree exactly with what you said, because we lost so many games at the start of the year by small margins. And I think people forget that, and people go, oh, we're however many wins and losses we are. I can't remember off the top of my head, 9 wins, I think.
Yeah.
And we forget that we had so many games against good sides like GWS and now Hawthorn that were really close games and winnable games. Port Adelaide as well, which was not all that long ago. And
Geelong
we
as
win
well
those
in round 1.
Exactly, yeah. And we win those games and we say, oh, well, we're in the finals race now where, we might be 9th on the ladder, had a chance to make finals after this week. And then the script completely changes. So we're quick to be negative, I think, because it's not been a train wreck of a season. And we're improving, and we're only going to get better next year and the year after that. So it hasn't been as bad as we thought, especially considering we're going to get 1, maybe 2 really high draft picks to go with it as well.
I think you're absolutely right. And this is why I hate the comments that, we're a much better team without Max King, because it's definitely not the case. If Max King was in that forward line in the last 6 weeks, again, taking out that Brisbane game, he probably would have scored 3-4 goals a game quite easily. Sharman's been doing it. While Sharman is I think he's a really good lead up forward, Max King is definitely a lot better. So it poses the question to you, Alana, comparing this year to what it was last year, even though we made finals, do you see a more structured, sort of less structured form going forward for the next few years, or have we taken a step back with this year's performance?
Yeah, I can sort of look at it both ways. I mean, last year was very exciting and came out of nowhere, and I think many of us maybe got a bit carried away thinking that, we're on the up and this is going to be the norm now. We're going to play finals, whereas I think maybe that was more the exception to the rule, and we're still in that not rebuilding phase as such, but maybe just that building stage. We're still trying to get the continuity with our players playing together. I think that does take a while, and I think that's a big factor in where we've started to play better in the second half of the year, is because we've got that continuity. The players sort of know now how their teammates play and where they're going to be leading to, or what position they're going to be, what they do, what their role is. So I think all that's really important. And I just hope that we can carry sort of the form from the second half of the year, bar the odd game like, Brisbane, and carry that forward into next year and get these games, Filippo to take off, to continue on where he left off is really important. Owens to have a really solid last few games, continue that on, and the team as a whole just to keep gelling together. And I think if we can do that and get a couple of these young guys through with the draft and just sort of keep adding to this team, because I think I've mentioned before, I really like our back line, which it sucks that we could lose Battle, but I mean, that's his decision, and I can't hold that against him if he wants to go. And I think the writing's probably on the wall there. So he does leave a hole in our back line. But, I think we've started well from there. We just need to keep adding to our midfield. If King can have a really solid, uninterrupted pre-season, I think that goes a long way to shaping up our forward line. So, yeah, I think there's definitely holes, but I do think we're going in the right direction.
Absolutely. And you touched on it as well, the younger players. And Kenny mentioned it in the comments. He only mentioned a few: Windhager, Dow, Filippo, and Burns. But then you also factor in, Naz is included in that. Mitch Owens, Caminiti, Sharman, King, Hunter Clark, again, who's, been so many injuries over the course of his short career. Paddy Dow, another, preseason for Jack Higgins as well. The smaller bodies. McLennan. Like, there's definitely a lot of talent there. It's just, now putting it all together. Looking through Geelong's list for this weekend's matchup, Ollie, what's your main concern with how they're playing at the moment? They had a bit of a drop in form. They come back, they won 4 of the last 5. They had a really strong win against the Dockers over in Perth on the last weekend. What's your main concern heading into Saturday night's game?
I reckon their forward line is what I'm most worried about. They're very dynamic. Stengel, Close, Myers, Ollie Henry, and then I'd include Jeremy Cameron in the dynamic category, to be honest. He's probably one of the most agile key forwards in the league. They can score from anywhere pretty much. Those guys, the small guys, can take set shots from 45 out and still flush them, and then they can crumb packs and things like that as well. So I think we need a lockdown on defense. We're the second best defense in the league. And I think if anyone can shut them down, we can. But, then it's the other side. Can we score as well? The biggest matchup being Cameron. I think if I would say Wilkie probably gets Cameron just because Shannon Neal's a bit bigger. So I'd say Dougal would take him. So if Wilkie can keep Cameron reasonably quiet, then that probably helps us out a lot, makes the team defense stronger.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there. Cameron, I think, goes completely underrated in terms of just how versatile, how dominant he can be within games. Like, we talk about players winning, football games off their boot. He's one player that can definitely do it. And I envy that we haven't had someone like that for quite some time. But their forward line is completely dynamic. They've got a lot of athleticism, a lot of agility on the ground, but in the air as well. With Ollie Henry, Cameron, Stengel, Paddy Dangerfield went down there last week and took some really good grabs. Looking through their midfield as well, Alana, and their forward line. Liam Stocker's played a little bit more midfield time the last couple of weeks. Does he go to someone like a Tom Stewart to put a big body in the midfield, or given that they're really dynamic up forward, do we put him back into the defensive 6?
I reckon he's probably got to play defensive 6 just because they have so many dangerous smalls. I think they've got Stengel and Close, and for me, I think Stocker takes one and Webster takes the other. But it's not an easy matchup for either of them, and I don't know which one is going to go which way. But yeah, I think we probably can't afford, especially when we've got Naz and Sinclair, who aren't your lockdown defenders either. So I think it's really important that we have those two shutdown sort of players with that forward line. They're just too dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. And I think we'd love to see Naz go through a little bit in the midfield more, rather than being that half back, because I think he does get found out a little bit with the one-on-one defensive, struggles. Comment from Harvey, I'm going to bring to your attention, Ollie. Who's going to Dangerfield? Burst out a stoppage I'm worried about because we don't have those speedy midfield. He did clarify to mean midfielders. But as I said, he had an extremely very captain-like game for Geelong last week. Knew that they had to win to keep their top 4 chances alive, and they did just that. His ability to go forward and impact the scoreboard, but his contested work was, extremely important. How do we stop that this week?
Yeah, he's one of those players that looks at St Kilda and goes and licks his lips and I'm going to have a big game here. He always does that. He's just one of those guys that we just can't stop. And I wouldn't mind, I was having a think before, I wouldn't mind seeing Zach Jones go to him just because I think he has the pace to keep up. I don't know if he could keep up all game, but at least the first half, try and nullify his impact. I think he's got the tenacity and the strength to try and at least hold him off from breaking lines like he normally does. Just because I can't see Hunter Clark tagging, and I think Jack Steele's role in the midfield is too great to send him to someone. I think Zach Jones is the most likely. Like, obviously, we'd like it. Actually, I don't know if Windy would be a good matchup, but even though he's our tagger, we'd like to see that sort of situation. But I think best available Zach Jones, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's a tough ask, and it's something that we don't have is that midfielder that's got the ability to burst from a pack and how important that can be. given that the struggles of our midfield all this year, we actually beat Geelong in the clearances in round one, lost the centre clearances, but is it a possibility, given that Steele's probably going to have to do a bit more dirty work, that Jack Sinclair goes into the middle a bit more this week?
I don't think so. I think his impact has been too great off the half-back line to stop. I think he saw a drop in form when he did go into the midfield. So I feel like it's more of a work on midfield time in the off-season and come back stronger next year sort of thing.
Yeah, no. And Alana, how do you see our forward line going up against their defence? They're a little bit of a smaller defensive unit, but they cover the ground really well. They, third man up. Guthrie's a really good intercept. Blitzars is good. Lawson Humphreys, who they've picked out of absolutely nowhere, has come in and been some really, played some really good minutes for them. How do you see our forward line stacking up?
Yeah, I mean, they've named Stewart in the middle, which I know he's played there a bit this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does a bit of both. So he's always very dangerous when he plays down back as well. And I hope we just don't keep kicking it to him either. So yeah, it's a tough ask for our forward line. They're all going to have to step up and be on their game. We're going to need big ones from Caminiti and Sharman to really test them in the air. Hopefully they can do what they did against the Bombers and take some contested grabs and make Geelong worry about us. And then same can be said for our smalls. I think Butler and Higgins need to get themselves into the game from the get-go. For whatever reason, I just feel like Higgins has been a little bit off the last sort of few weeks. I've mentioned it elsewhere, but yeah, he just, I don't know, there's something about him. He seems frustrated, or it's like he's doing the work and it's just not coming off for him and he's just like having a bad time with it. So I'd love for him to kick our first goal and get himself up and firing. And I think that sort of sets the barometer for the team and maybe even gets Butler going. But if Butler can just get involved and stick some of those tackles that he couldn't quite stick last week, same goes for him. So, yeah, I think that whole forward line, we're going to be asking a lot from all of them because, yeah, they're going to need to take the opportunities when they come.
100%. I like that you touched on Butler and Higgins. I think our small forwards the last probably month or so have been a little bit quiet in terms of the consistency and hitting the scoreboard. I don't think either of them, they may have kicked one goal or two between them last week. They were non-existent against Brisbane and the week before that as well. So definitely need for them two to pull out some big guns this weekend. Let's jump to Under the Microscope before we go through some more questions from those that are watching at home. And again, share your thoughts. Who's under the microscope this week? A little bit different after Brisbane performance against Richmond, but who's under the microscope for you, Ollie?
I think it's a difficult one this week just because it was a pretty all-round team performance. You could go the small forwards that you were speaking about before, but I think I'm going to go with Bradley Hill. I wasn't too sure, but I think he's just been really quiet since his 250th. He just hasn't had much of an impact on the wing like he normally would. He did go half forward for a while, and they've obviously team sheet's just team sheet, but they've swapped him and Mason Wood around. So maybe they want to get him back into the game a little bit more and get him a few more touches around the ball and sort of those sort of chip kicks that we see him do into the middle of the ground. He kind of hasn't been doing as much and then running on for the handball. So I think if we can get him back into the game, it would be big. But yeah, he hasn't looked like himself. He hasn't been trying to break lines and, running bounces, that sort of thing like we're used to. So yeah, big game from him this week.
Absolutely. Now, before I go to you, Alana, seems to be a common theme. Under the microscope, Chris, Butler and Higgins, biscuit or cake. I'm more of a biscuit guy, but definitely need Butler and Higgins to fire. And then Daryl has also said Higgins kicks a bag every 4 to 5 weeks. This could be the one. Alex, Higo, and Butler for me under the microscope. So I love that, everyone's sort of on the same wavelength in terms of what we're expecting from these guys. Bailey, Brad Hill has a good game, will impact the team. He just brings excitement to the whole team with his run. I think I like Ollie's point. I think he needs to be a little bit more involved. And then STR, Stocker for sure can be part of the best 22, especially if Battle leaves. Alana, who's under the microscope for you this week?
Well, given that we've already touched on Higgins and Butler, I won't throw them under the bus any further. They've already got enough comments. So I'm going to go with Mason Wood because I'd just love for him to have a huge game. I feel like he could really impact this game, utilize his size. I think it could be a real point of difference, getting us out of danger in the back half, but also really putting the pressure on in the forward half. Especially, I think it was a game against Essendon where he was just really key in being one of those contested mark go-to guys. So, yeah, I'd love for him to really have a good game against quality opposition and give them something to think about if we could just, really utilise what he can bring.
Absolutely. I think Ollie might have touched on it before. You sort of want Geelong to worry about us rather than the other way around. And Mason Wood definitely has the capabilities to do that. Harvey, if Caminiti and Sharman take the two key Geelong backs, memory could be in for a night getting a favourable matchup or vice versa with Sharman. Definitely one to look for. For me, I'm going to go with our ball movement. So Naz, Sinks, Hill, Ronnie Burns probably included in that as well. I feel like when we're exiting the defensive 50 at the moment, we're a little bit too slow. Given that Geelong love to play the boundary, they love to clog the midfield as well in terms of the corridor. I'd love to see the midfield and those particular ball movers, utilize the corridor as much as we can this weekend. Get handball receives. We're getting the marks on the outside, but we're just rely on our chip game to sort of work the ball around. I don't think that's what Ross really wants. We did it a bit against Richmond, which I thought, I don't like the look of this. But Hill just to run past, grab a handball, and move the ball a little bit more freely is definitely what I'm looking for this week under the microscope. Share your thoughts on that one for you guys at home, whether you not agree or disagree with our opinions. Alana's gone with Mason Wood, Ollie with Brad Hill, and I've gone with the ball movement. Want to bring up a comment from Alex here. So if we can do some good drafting and some trading, can see us up in their terms of challenging for finals next year and keep main players fit. I don't want to touch too much on the trading and free agency and all that sort of stuff. But for the comment in terms of what we're looking at, Ollie, is that something that we can see heading into 25 and beyond? That all it takes is a few good years of the draft table.
Yeah, I think the last couple of years have shown the sort of way that the coaches want to go with the development of the team, especially seeing Darcy Wilson hasn't had a rest this year. Mateus didn't have a rest last year. And if we are going to the draft table this year and we're not trying to trade our top pick for anyone, it's a good way to develop players, because I think what we tried to do last time was bring in the ready-made players and it didn't work. So I think they're going the other way this time. Although it's a lot of different coaching staff, they're trying to do it a different way, because that's what's worked a lot of times for a lot of teams. They develop their young talent, and then right when they're about to peak, they'll bring someone in, one free agent, like we've been talking about LDU, or someone of that ilk. Like you bring in the ready-made player to go with the developed talent, and then it clicks for most teams. So I think that's what they're trying to go with.
Absolutely. Alana, this is a hard-hitting question. Is this Battle's second last game for the Saints?
Unfortunately, I'm leaning towards yes, it is. I don't know if you start to read too much into things, like, because people take him having his kid in the room meaning that he wants to stay. But to me, I'm just like, is this him saying farewell? Like, you can just look at everything both ways. And I don't know, the longer he doesn't sign, the more I think, well, if you haven't signed, it's because you can't sign with Hawthorn yet. So to me, that's my only reasoning. If you're staying, you've signed up. So yeah, I just think the writing's on the wall. But I would love to be wrong. I think it's really important to keep our good players, and we've put so much development into the guy. It's going to be such a shame to have him play his best year of footy and say goodbye. So I'm not one that would rather lose him and get the pick. I think he's so valuable and we need to keep our good players. But, he's got a family to look after, and he's not going to be making huge money once he retires. So he's got to look after himself. And I get that. And God, who wouldn't want to play for the Hawks at the moment? They're flying. So Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that the Hawks have had to come good as well, because I think that hasn't probably helped us at all. But what do you do? Yeah,
It's a tough situation for sure. I like that you mentioned that you're one that prefers him to stay rather than the pick, because I'm of the opposite. As much as I love Josh Battle, I think he's an extremely valuable player. But with Tassie coming in and the depth of this midfield draft, especially the top 7 or 8 picks, is exactly what we need. And it sucks that we have to lose someone for that to happen. But I feel like if we can get pick 5 and 6 and get some really good A-grade talent, that'll develop within 2 to 3 years, that's going to be much stronger for us for a longevity point of view rather than just a short-term burst into finals, maybe winning 1 or 2, which is like what we did last time when we topped up with those recycled players. We shot out of the gates. It was COVID year. We beat Bulldogs and then lost to Richmond in the semi. But to take a long sustained success, these are the decisions that either make or break a club. And I'll happily stand by it. In 12 months or 3 years time, it might come back that we made a wrong decision, and 100% I'll admit it. But I think in this situation, it is perfect. But it sort of rolls on to my next question for both of you. If that does happen, we get pick 5, pick 6 with a compensation. With the names that have been coming out, especially out of Melbourne at the moment, do you throw one of those picks to lure that A-grade talent? And we all know who we're talking about, Christian Petrarca.
I don't know. I don't think he's leaving. I think that was a bit of a beat up, to be honest. I think
let's go hypothetically then.
Okay. I think we'd all want Christian Petrarca, if we're honest. He's still of an age where he's going to contribute for a few years before he starts to regress. I think the more likely situation would be that Oliver would leave. I don't know whether we need a ball pig that just racks up disposals.
Yeah.
But Christian Petrarca would be incredible. He would be incredible. But yeah, I don't know.
Again, I was talking to one of the guys in the rooms on Saturday night, like whoever gets paid to do these decisions, they don't get paid enough because, sitting here talking about it, like, oh, if we did this is what it would look like. But then what's the repercussions, 2 years down the track, 3 years down the track, those sort of things. But again, Alana, if you pick 5 and 6 and, Melbourne was actually looking to offload a Petrarca type player or another club doing similar, would you dangle one of those to go, okay, let's draft one, but let's actually poach one as well?
Oh, if it was as simple as, we could offer one pick and maybe a later round and get Petrarca, absolutely. And I'd be looking, I think it's pretty ironic in a way, because I remember probably 10 years ago now, we could have snagged him. And there were rumors back then that he'd sort of said, I don't want to come to the Saints. I want to come to Melbourne. That they're just things I heard back 10 years ago. So I'd think it'd be pretty funny now if the tables turned and he ended up in red, white and black. But I'm with Ollie. Reality couldn't see it, but I'd bloody love to have him. I wanted him 10 years ago, and that's not changed.
Football can do some funny things. It's interesting how it can all play out. Few comments before we finish up. Kenny, I agree. Let Battle go with our thanks and blessing. Pick 6 for Andrew Brayshaw, not Petrarca. Brayshaw only 24 and has a great relationship with Ross Lyon. Fremantle's going to be asking for pick 6 and a lot more than pick 6, I would assume. I think they've got him touted to be the next captain for that footy club. But again, it all poses questions. As I mentioned previously, we will do sort of like an off-season trade/draft sort of, version of teams as well, where we can sit down a little bit more in depth and see who's going to be valuable going forward. But as of this Saturday night, as I said, second last home game for us at Marvel Stadium. We've called out the fans all year, Ollie and I especially. So definitely get down there Saturday night to support the boys. But how are we going to go this weekend, starting with you, Alana?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, we go okay against the Cats. I think there's been the odd game where they've just, annihilated us. But I think more often than not, we're quite competitive and hold our own. Even earlier this year down at the Cattery, we put on a pretty good performance and stuck pretty close by with them. So, yeah, I'd be looking to do the same. I mean, they have so much to play for. They've got top 4 on the line, so that in itself is going to make it a big ask for us. And I don't think they're the type of team that crumble in these big games like Essendon. So I think it's going to be a really tough ask, but I hope we're up for the challenge and compete for 4 quarters, and anything can happen. So, yeah, I mean, we've seen this season, literally anything can happen. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what we bring.
Absolutely. Anything can definitely happen. And I think, currently with, Essendon being Essendon, Carlton doing Carlton things as well. It's sort of a good feeling in Victoria when you're not a supporter of those big 3 clubs and see what's happening with them. It sort of brings a smile to your face a little bit. Chris has gone with his scoreboard. Saints 102, Geelong 89. I love how we're getting more confidence that we're going to score over 100 points every week. Makes me smile. Alex, Saints by 8, but both teams score 60 plus points. That's fair. And Adrian, Saints 102, Cats 49. Ooh, Chris Scott would not be happy with that. Ollie, Mr. Optimistic, how are we going this weekend?
Yeah, still optimistic, as always, but I agree with Alana in that the Cats don't lose these games. Like, we've seen it, they're just so good for years. And Chris Scott coached teams especially. Like, he's a ruthless coach and he knows how to win, so they're not gonna back down. I think they'll try and put us to the sword, but hopefully our form, bar the Brisbane game, as of late, keeps us in good stead and we're at least competitive. If we don't, obviously I'm going to tip us to win, but if we don't win, I'd like us to be competitive for at least 3 out of 4 quarters.
100%. And it comes back to that mentality that they sort of brought out, 4 or 5 weeks ago, is let's be the Grinch. Let's be the one that's going to spoil the party. And for Geelong, it's not going to be, kicking him out of finals, but for an aging list like they are, yeah, they're, full of experience, but that extra week off that they could get with the top 4 chance is massive. To give them the, reality of, okay, they've actually got to play 4 games in a row and win all of them to get to that end point. It's a completely different mindset that they would have to have. So I'm confident. I think, we stack up well against Geelong. We played well against them in the first week of the season. We lost by 8 points. Dangerfield was probably, one of the best to field and took a really crucial mark and goal at the end of the game to sort of seal it for them. But back on our home deck, I think it's a big possibility. So get down to the game Saturday night, 7:10 p.m. I think, or might be 7:30. I don't know. Roughly around 7 o'clock. We'll go with that at Marvel Stadium. Last home game. Saints are saying thanks to their fans. So get down there and support them and say thank you to them for this season, and get around all the Saints fans before we finish up for the end of the year. Alana, Ollie, thank you very much for your input tonight and for joining me. And for those that are home, again, thank you for sharing your comments and thoughts of the Saints for this week. As we said, Hugo Garcia in, McClellan has been dropped to the 2s for this weekend. Saturday night against Geelong. As always, go the mighty Saints.
Go Saints.
Go Saints. Thanks.